Ready when you are.
All right, I'm ready. Hi, my name is Ari Elias-Bachrach, and I'm talking about, this is actually my first time presenting here. It's my second meeting. I was supposed to present the first time I was here, but I got bumped due to time constraints. So this is still my first presentation. I'm here to talk about basically better ways of measuring password complexity. So the thing I want to talk about first is what's wrong with the current way we measure password complexity. In my opinion, it's horrible and awful, and I will hope to convince you of that all too. I do have a better alternative, and I also am going to show the better alternative will hopefully be able to actually help us, give us data that will help us answer some of the questions we're actually trying to ask and that the business leaders are actually trying to ask us that we oftentimes can't answer. So this is, I'll go over this part quickly because I'm sure you've all seen this probably at least 1,000,000 times in your life. Usually when we want to figure out if a password policy is good, we figure out how long is the password, what kind of things can go in it. So if you have a 4-digit PIN like on your ATM or your iPhone, you say, okay, there's 10 possibilities for each digit. There's 4 digits, 4 to the 10th, 10,000, boom. That's how many possible combinations we have here. If you make it more complex, let's say you go out to 6 digits, you add in letters, okay, so now there's 36 possibilities. You've got six possible characters. 6 to the 36th is some big number. It's about 10 to the 27th. That's what we usually do. And then on top of this, we then usually start making more calculations. We say, okay, if you've got this policy here and you've got 10 to the 27th possible passwords, how long is it going to take to crack the average password? How long is it going to take to exhaust the entire key space? How long will it take to crack the mean password? All these other things, all these other calculations, all these other important decisions we make are all based on this one fundamental calculation. And the problem is it has a fatal flaw, which is that humans are not computers. If computers were to pick passwords, they would pick every password, every possible password in that, say, 10 to the 27th key space, they would pick it evenly. People don't do that. People pick these very common passwords, and they pick them a lot. If you wanted to graph this, I don't know if those lines actually show up for you guys in the back. You know, a computer selecting it would have a lot of entropy. It would basically be a flat line. Every password has an equal chance of getting picked. Whereas when people pick them, the passwords over on the left side, whatever those are, whatever the more common passwords are much more likely to get picked than, shall we say, the long tail of passwords. And then on top of that, whenever human nature, again, people are lazy. If you give people passwords and then you add some sort of complexity, we think, oh, it's going to make it more complex. The problem is people just do that. People just take whatever their old password was. If you say you got to add a number, they just add a number. You haven't really increased the randomness necessarily of the passwords that are being selected. If people do this, you still have your whatever X number of most common passwords will still be the keys to whatever that number of accounts was. So if you had, in the simple case, if you had, that is why I hate walking around now with because I'm blocking the slide. But if your attacker here on the simple case is focusing on whatever this number here is, the X most common passwords, they're going to unlock whatever this area is, that number of accounts. And if you add the complexity and all people do is this, you haven't done anything. Those X passwords might have changed, but those X passwords when the attacker tries them are still going to unlock that same number of accounts. To show you how wrong we are. So this is a graph of the most common iPhone unlock passwords, basically, the unlock sequences. So this is the top 10 passwords and their frequency. If in the given sample size, you'll notice the numbers are raw numbers, not percentages. So if we were to make the naive assumption, which is every password has an equal likelihood of getting picked, you would say, okay, 10 passwords, there's 10,000 possible passwords. This should be 0.1% of all passwords. It's not. It's about 15%. These top 10 passwords represent 15% of all passwords. And remember from that slide earlier, all those other assumptions we make are all based on our, I'll call it the naive assumption. The naive assumption is every password gets picked evenly. All those other calculations we make about how long it'll take to crack a password are based on the naive assumption that these 10 passwords will only make up 0.1% of all the passwords. And again, they clearly don't. What we need to do is start measuring password policies not by the total number of possible combinations, but by the things people do when they actually have that policy applied to them. So again, let's say you've got passwords sorted by commonality. Your very common passwords are over at the left. Your very rare passwords are over here at the right. And this graph basically is the number of occurrences of that password in some given user set. So attackers, again, are going to be focusing, and depending on what the attack method is, they may be focusing on a wider sample here, but they're focusing all their attention over at the left side. They're not bothering as much with the long tail. They're not going to try to bother to crack this gobbledygook over here. They're going for the easy ones. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if those lines, I should have made the lines thicker for people in the back. What we want to do then is we want to find policies that basically create flatter curves. So in this fictitious thing here, policy 1 is the worst. The attacker, if they're checking n common passwords, they're going to get access to the most number of accounts here. Policy 2 is a little better. Policy 3 is much better. Forgot to add a slide in entropy. So for those of you familiar with the mathematical concept of entropy in information theory, that's basically what we're looking at. Entropy is the randomness of a distribution. And what you want in a password policy is not one that's going to create the most possible passwords, but the one that humans will pick passwords with the most entropy, the most different passwords. It doesn't matter if your users all pick this super ridiculous, complex 27-character alphanumeric uppercase, lowercase password, if all your users pick that same password. All right. So what I've been trying to do, and I've got some preliminary data at the end, but I've been having a hard time getting data actually, is basically going through password dumps on the internet, all those things on Pastebin and BitTorrent and wherever else I can find them. Cracking the passwords, sadly, if necessary. A shocking number of the dumps do not require step number 2. And then analyze the entropy of those dumps, correlate it with the password policy. And the idea is to actually answer some questions. I would like actual real data. I would like to be able to answer this question, for example, with actual math. Next time the CIO comes to me and says, okay, we gotta, whatever, strengthen our password policy, but we can't make our users do everything. It'll upset the users. They're gonna revolt. We can only do one. Which one is better? Insisting that the users use a number or insisting that they use a special character? I would like to have a actual factual answer to that question that's not based on, my intuition or flipping a coin.
Theoretically, it would be better if they had a symbol or some special character because you have more special characters as opposed to more.
But again, do people use all the special symbols?
Would every single person just choose exclamation point?
Every single person. What if every person just chooses exclamation point? Have you actually increased your password complexity? I mean, this gets back, that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, but that kind of gets back to the crux of what we're talking about. It's that people aren't going to pick every special character. People also don't choose every number. I'll bet you 1 gets used a lot more than the other 9 digits. So you guys all know my password by now, I hope. So which one of those is better? I don't really know. I mean, we could debate it for a long time with no data, but I'd like to have some data so that we would know. And another example, same thing. 6 characters, 1 letter and 1 number, or 8 characters. And that one's even harder to compare because it's not a simple, it's multiple variables going on here. Which one's better? I have no idea. And if anyone else knows, let me know. Two-factor authentication. Don't use passwords.
Honestly, I don't crack passwords anymore.
Yeah, I'll confess. I feel about passwords sort of the same way a cancer researcher feels about cancer, I think. Like, yeah, I'm doing research on it right now, and it's kind of interesting, but I also wish they would go away. This is some of the preliminary data I've managed to get. And as you can see, it's very, very little. So when I say preliminary, don't go like quoting this anywhere. It's possible some of this is even bad. Again, unfortunately, when you troll Pastebin for password dumps, you find some bad data. Most of them I managed to get rid of already, but there could still be some that I've missed. I also found, unfortunately, no password dumps that I could find that actually implemented any password complexity other than a length restriction. But you can see, for the most part, with a few outliers. I'm sort of curious about this one, why the entropy is so high. You can see as the required length of the password increases, the entropy does go up. which is what we've sort of, it's what you'd assume based on the policies. In this case, we support the policies we've been, demanding for all these years. It does go up. Even though at the same time, interesting, one of the theories I had when I started talking to people about this is someone suggested, well, as you increase the required minimum length of passwords, you're actually reducing the total size of the set of possible passwords. So there was at least one person who theorized that that might make the entropy go down, because it would actually reduce the total number of possible passwords. Again, we actually have some data. As I said, though, what I really need is data. And that's one of the reasons I'm here. I'm hoping, almost as bad as the previous pun.
Yeah, I can help you after.
Okay, excellent. I really need data. If you've got a big array somewhere of hard drives that has tons of password dumps, I would really love to get at it. Okay, I guess I'm talking to him in about 5 minutes. What?
Rob.
Oh, PW-Crack, I talked to Rob. He's sitting farther back.
Rob, the difference between
Rob.
the ones that require you to change passwords every X number of days or something? And
Yeah.
the differential between their old one and the new one?
Yeah. Oh, that would. I mean, because people just cycle through password 1, password 2, password 3, password.
It wouldn't necessarily impact the entropy of a given set, but next month's password set compared to this month's password set will have the smallest amount of differences possible in order to meet those requirements.
What? Like 2 slides, one of which is the concluding one. So, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. There are lots of other factors I haven't even started getting into, and part of it is because the data I have access to is basically public breaches on the internet. So where public breaches, they're publicly facing services. Things like Yahoo, that one at the top is Yahoo Voices. These are like some public message boards. London is some message board for people trying to rent apartments around the London Olympics. Chiclet is a fish lover forum or something like that. I don't really know. Fish like pet fish. Chiclet is a kind of fish. As I learned from visiting that website.
No LinkedIn?
What?
No LinkedIn?
I've heard of LinkedIn. What is this website you speak of?
Their password dope?
I haven't managed to find it. If you can find it, that would be one I'd like to get. But anyway, great. All right. We might want to pick another protocol. But
It'll take a while, but I'll get it to you.
But I was going to say, most of these are publicly facing things which have very, very weak very weak policies. If an online bank ever got breached, I would be all over that data set, but I don't know of many, big banks that have been breached, thankfully. That I know of. That have then been publicly dumped and I've stumbled across it. So things like password rotation is going to be harder to get simply because I think there's less data there. But yeah, that's another factor I would love to incorporate if I could. Which gets me back to the slide I was on, which is I need data. If anyone's got it, I would love to have more. I'd love to do more analysis. Last slide. Basically, the summary of this is I don't think that the way we calculate complexity now is correct. I think that it leads us down a lot of bad paths. I think I hear a lot of people saying things like, oh, don't worry, with this password policy, it will take an attacker umpteen kajillion years to break an average password. Come on, you talk to the password crackers out there, within 24 hours they've broken 70% of the sets usually. I mean, it's ridiculous. Bob can, I'm sure, fill in some more data about how easily he cracks these things. But those, all these stats are just ridiculous, and it's because we're basing them all on a very naive assumption, which, it's mathematically sound, but not humanly sound, because humans just aren't that, humans just aren't like computers.
So company 123 is not a good password?
Well, no, it's a perfect password as long as no one else in the universe uses that password. So anyway, actually want to quantify the strength of password policies by analyzing lots of different dumps or lots of different password data. The only way I can think to get password data right now is password dumps from public breaches. Actually quantify them and then provide some answers. I'd like to be able to have a business person come to me and say, okay, if we implement this policy, or increase our policy from X to Y, what will that actually do in the real world? How many less weak passwords will we have if we change our policy? Which I think would be huge when talking to the business people instead of just going, it's industry best practice, because I hate having to do that. All right, questions?
Are you going to make it a public standard?
I don't think a standard is going to come out of here. I mean, I certainly will. A standard?
Right.
So I'm not good at.
Essentially just publicize, say, hey, if you do X, you get this much.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh,
You do that much.
oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, once my goal is to publish this. I mean, I don't have I have secrets, but none of them are here. Yeah, no. My goal is to collect data and publish it and get it out there so people can see this.
Where?
Where will I publish it? I have no idea. Right now, I'm still very early in the project, so, and I haven't had as much time, frankly, to work on it as I wanted.
If
So.
you make the policy and publish it, will that affect the eventual results? Because you'll skew people towards that?
Because I'll skew people towards a certain policy.
Will that like affect your?
I don't. So this, while the project is technical, what I'm trying to, the truth is what I'm digging at is an aspect of human nature. How do people act under certain conditions? I don't know. It's worthy of some thought and maybe some discussion. I see that the pizza's here, so maybe we can discuss this in a few minutes over pizza. But I don't think this will, that having more people gravitate towards certain policies will affect how people act under those policies. I also don't think this is necessarily going to create a rush towards a single policy, because what you're going to end up with, hopefully, in my ideal world, is you're going to end up with a series of basically data and say, okay, this policy X policy will yield Y, this policy will yield this policy will yield this. And it's up to the people in every entity and in every system to make a risk-based decision and decide, okay, this is the policy that's appropriate for us. I mean, we all know that you can make stronger password policies, and the business people fight back because it drives the users insane. So it's all about finding that balance. This will provide some data that will help people find that balance, but different people are still going to find different balances. Yahoo Voices is always going to have a worse password policy than the NSA, no matter what. So, yeah.
So I think the publishing of the analysis is a good thing, and it's probably pretty straightforward because there's a lot of data to work with, right? But probably,
You would think, but it's harder.
but probably equally important, I guess, as a second stage would be that work with companies that have actually implemented changes that have some data prior to the change and have a data point after the change to quantify the effect on that entropy and then publish that.
Yeah, no, yeah, that would be a great.
You have to work with companies
That would be willing to let me look at their passwords. Yeah.
Well, that will do that.
Yeah, the great thing about this actually is if the passwords have been hashed and not salted, I don't need to crack the hashes. Because you're just going for entropy. If they've been salted, then you got to crack them all. But again, the old thing, if if you got two of the same password and you hash them the same way, they end up with the same result. So.
Okay, thanks.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Pizza. There's only certain